Alexander the Great is remembered as one of history's most extraordinary military minds, his conquests reshaping the ancient world in ways no one could have predicted. By the time of his untimely death at the age of 32, he had forged an empire that stretched from Greece to the edges of India, a vast and unified realm that seemed destined to last forever. He had united people from diverse cultures and conquered kingdoms that were thought to be unconquerable. But what happens when the mighty conqueror is gone? How does the empire that he built, seemingly invincible, fall into ruin so quickly? The truth is both shocking and tragic. After Alexander's death, the very men who helped him rise to greatness, the Diadochi, his trusted generals, betrayed him, fought among themselves, and shattered everything he had worked for. In the wake of Alexander's sudden death, the empire was left without a clear successor. His son, Alexander IV, was too young, and his half-brother, Aridaeus, was mentally unfit to rule. This power vacuum ignited fierce and bloody struggles, as each of Alexander's generals, men who once fought side by side under his command, now sought to carve out their own kingdoms from the empire's broken fragments. What followed was a series of brutal wars, known as the Diadochi Wars, where alliances were forged and broken, kingdoms rose and fell, and betrayal became a constant companion. These wars weren't just about land, they were about legacy, control, and the pursuit of power at all costs. This video will take you on a journey through the rise and fall of Alexander's empire, a tale marked by both genius and madness. We'll explore how Alexander's greatest triumphs turned into his most tragic failures, and how the men who were supposed to protect his legacy ended up destroying it. From the first cracks in the empire's foundation to the bloody battles that decided its fate, we'll uncover the heartbreaking story of how a world on the brink of unity was torn apart by ambition, betrayal, and the lust for power. Stay tuned, because what you're about to witness is the tragic and unexpected collapse of one of the greatest empires in history. This is the sad end of Alexander's empire, the Diadochi Wars. In the span of just 13 years, Alexander the Great achieved what many believed was impossible. He united a vast empire stretching from Greece to the edges of India. His military genius, relentless ambition, and vision of a world where East met West fueled this astonishing achievement. Alexander built cities, spread Greek culture, and embraced the customs of the lands he conquered, making him a figure both loved and feared. But in 323 BCE, while in Babylon, Alexander fell gravely ill and, after days of suffering, passed away at the young age of 32. His death was an earth-shaking tragedy, and without warning, the mighty empire he had carved out was left leaderless. This sudden loss threw the empire into chaos. His death was a devastating blow not only for his closest followers but for all who had believed in his vision of a united world. Mourning swept through the empire, and fear took root. Who would now lead this massive, multicultural empire that Alexander had built? The problem was glaring. Alexander left no clear plan for succession. The immediate heirs were his half-brother Aridaeus, who suffered from what was described as a mental incapacity that rendered him incapable of ruling, and his infant son, Alexander IV, who was far too young to lead. With no strong leader in place, a massive power vacuum emerged. The generals who had fought beside Alexander, men who had seen him conquer entire kingdoms and destroy enemies without hesitation, suddenly found themselves on equal footing. Each of them felt they had a right to a piece of the empire, yet none of them trusted the others enough to truly share power. This lack of succession opened the door to fierce ambitions among Alexander's most trusted commanders, known as the Diadochi, or successors. Perdiccas, Alexander's second-in-command and one of his most loyal generals, took control of the royal ring, a powerful symbol of authority, and aimed to keep the empire united under Alexander's family. He knew it would be nearly impossible, but he believed he had both the loyalty and the strategic mind to keep Alexander's dream alive. However, other generals quickly saw an opportunity to pursue their own ambitions. Ptolemy, a brilliant tactician known for his cunning, wasted no time in claiming Egypt, seeing it as a strategic base from which he could expand. Seleucus, a keen strategist and seasoned fighter, seized Babylon and eyed the eastern territories, understanding that controlling these regions could eventually give him the upper hand. But the landscape of the Diadochi Wars wasn't just shaped by these two. Antigonus, nicknamed the One-Eyed for his fearsome appearance and bravery, took command of the western territories, viewing himself as the rightful heir to Alexander's vision in Europe. He was ruthless and relentless, and his goal was nothing short of reuniting the empire under his rule. Meanwhile, Lysimachus, a hardened warrior and skilled ruler, secured Thrace, hoping to build his own kingdom in the north. Cassander, the son of one of Alexander's earliest supporters, held Macedonia and Greece, seeing himself as the natural successor to Alexander's homeland. Cassander was politically shrewd and unafraid to use ruthless tactics to eliminate any potential rivals. Each of these men had fought beside Alexander, shared his dreams, and carried the scars of countless battles. But their loyalty to him faded in the face of personal ambition. They saw themselves as inheritors of Alexander's legacy, but their rivalry would soon shatter that legacy. Perdiccas's attempts to maintain unity soon began to crumble under the weight of mistrust and betrayal. Ptolemy in Egypt, secure in his new kingdom, had no intention of submitting to Perdiccas or anyone else. Tensions grew, alliances shifted, and the stage was set for a brutal, decades-long struggle. What followed was a period of relentless warfare, intrigue, and betrayal. These generals, the Diadochi, would form alliances, betray one another, and plunge the empire into chaos in pursuit of their own glory. Their battles would turn friends into enemies, make heroes into villains, and erase the unity Alexander had strived to create. By the end of it, Alexander's great empire would be fractured beyond repair, reduced to warring kingdoms ruled by men who had once called themselves brothers in arms. The Diadochi Wars would be a brutal reminder that while Alexander's vision could conquer the world, it could not conquer human ambition. In the turbulent days following Alexander's death, his loyal second-in-command, Perdiccas, took on the daunting task of trying to hold together the massive, diverse empire Alexander had built. Entrusted with Alexander's royal ring, a symbol of the authority he'd been granted by the late king, Perdiccas saw himself as the protector of Alexander's legacy. He was determined to keep the empire intact, believing that Alexander's dream of unity could only survive if the empire remained whole. Acting as a regent for Alexander's infant son, Alexander IV, and the mentally unfit Aridaeus, Perdiccas aimed to use his power to maintain unity and prevent the empire from splintering. He quickly appointed governors to manage regions across the vast territory, carefully selecting individuals who he thought would uphold Alexander's ideals and remain loyal to a united empire. His goal was to preserve order, hoping to calm any ambition that might arise among the generals. However, these appointments and Perdiccas's authority were not enough to stifle the ambitions that were already bubbling up among the commanders who had once followed Alexander's lead. Ptolemy, one of Alexander's most trusted and cunning generals, would not settle for a mere governorship. He had larger plans of his own and saw a unique opportunity in Egypt, a region rich in resources and naturally fortified by the Nile River. Without hesitation, Ptolemy took control of Egypt, declaring it his own and disregarding Perdiccas' authority. By claiming Egypt as an independent base of power, Ptolemy effectively set himself up as a king, separate from the unity Perdiccas was trying to enforce. Ptolemy's bold move made a statement to the other generals, that they, too, could carve out pieces of the empire if they had the strength and resolve to do so. Ptolemy had planted the seed of independence, and soon others began to imagine similar fates for themselves. Perdiccas recognized the gravity of Ptolemy's defiance. Egypt was not only a strategic stronghold but also a psychological blow to the concept of a united empire. Ptolemy's seizure of Egypt was a powerful symbol, and it created the first major rift in Alexander's empire. What had once seemed like a possibility, that the generals could work together to uphold their leader's dream, was now slipping away. As news of Ptolemy's actions spread, tension brewed among the other generals, each of whom began to question their loyalties and priorities. Many of them, already wary of Perdiccas's intentions, now saw in Ptolemy's example a path toward their own ambitions. Antipater, the regent in Macedonia, grew suspicious of Perdiccas, suspecting that he might be using his regency to consolidate power for himself rather than for the empire. The fragile alliances between these powerful men began to show strain, and whispers of mistrust became louder. In the face of Ptolemy's defiance, Perdiccas found himself confronting a choice. He could allow the generals to continue their power grabs, risking the complete disintegration of the empire, or he could act against them and attempt to enforce unity by force. He opted for the latter, and tensions between Perdiccas and the other generals escalated as he tried to rein them in. This decision set the stage for the first sparks of civil war, as the dream of a unified empire now clashed with the stark reality of each general's hunger for control. Perdiccas's attempts to exert authority over Ptolemy and the other governors failed to stem the tide of unrest. Ptolemy, secure in Egypt, refused to back down, while others began secretly plotting and aligning themselves against Perdiccas. His authority was being directly challenged, and with every defiance, the vision of unity became more and more distant. With each step Perdiccas took to try and control the generals, they only grew more defiant, and their ambitions less veiled. They saw that Perdiccas was struggling to maintain control, and his authority weakened further as whispers of revolt spread. The empire, once held together by Alexander's strength and charisma, was now falling apart, as each general saw their role not as stewards of a legacy, but as opportunities to gain power. Perdiccas's efforts to govern an empire united only by the memory of a fallen conqueror were proving nearly impossible, as the bonds of loyalty that had held Alexander's men together were breaking. The stage was set for a brutal series of conflicts among the generals, a civil war that would shatter the empire and turn brother against brother in the ruthless pursuit of power. The story of Alexander's successors was no longer one of unity. It was a tale of ambition, betrayal, and the hard fall of an empire torn apart from within. With the embers of Alexander's empire quickly igniting into open conflict, the First Diadochi War began, a brutal struggle sparked by ambition, mistrust, and the desire for power. Perdiccas, entrusted by Alexander himself and determined to enforce unity, saw Ptolemy's defiance in Egypt as a dangerous precedent. If left unchecked, Ptolemy's bold seizure of Egypt could inspire others to do the same, threatening to unravel the empire. For Perdiccas, a campaign against Ptolemy was more than a battle for territory. It was a test of his authority and the ultimate statement that Alexander's empire was not to be divided. Confident in his position, Perdiccas set out for Egypt, his sights fixed on dismantling Ptolemy's base of power and restoring order to the fractured empire. However, the challenges of an Egyptian campaign were far greater than Perdiccas anticipated. The natural defenses of the Nile presented a formidable barrier, and Ptolemy, familiar with the landscape and well prepared for an invasion, had fortified key positions. Perdiccas' forces soon encountered relentless resistance, their progress slowed by the harsh desert environment and fierce opposition. Under the unforgiving sun and battling logistical difficulties, Perdiccas' men faced a grueling march through Egypt's rough terrain. They struggled not only with the punishing conditions but with the realization that this campaign, once painted as a noble quest to save the empire, was now a bitter struggle that seemed destined for failure. Each attempt to cross the Nile was thwarted, each skirmish with Ptolemy's forces draining morale and resources. Perdiccas, driven by his need to maintain control, pressed on despite these setbacks, unwilling to acknowledge the limits of his campaign. The high casualties and failed maneuvers, however, sowed seeds of doubt among his men, who began to question his leadership. This campaign, meant to be a swift and decisive show of strength, had become a nightmare, and rumors of dissent started spreading within the ranks. Frustration and exhaustion mounted, and Perdiccas's inability to deliver victories turned loyalty into resentment. In the end, it was not Ptolemy's forces that would end Perdiccas's campaign, but his own troops, disillusioned and driven to mutiny by his relentless, misguided push for control. The breaking point came during one of their most costly failed attacks. The soldiers, feeling abandoned and enraged by the futility of the campaign, took matters into their own hands. In a moment that would send shockwaves through the empire, a group of his officers assassinated Perdiccas in his own camp. This was not just the murder of a commander, it was the ultimate act of defiance against the very notion of a united empire under one regent. The assassination of Perdiccas marked a pivotal shift, a stark realization among the generals that power could be seized without loyalty or restraint. His death was a watershed moment, symbolizing the official end of any hope for unity under a central figure. It was a clear message to the other Diadochi. Alexander's dream of a unified empire had died with him, and now it was every man for himself. The fall of Perdiccas shattered any remaining illusion of unity among Alexander's former generals. The Diadochi, now fully aware that loyalty held little value in their pursuit of power, set their sights on carving out their own realms. Ptolemy's defiance had been the spark, and Perdiccas's downfall became the explosion, plunging the empire into a prolonged period of violent struggle and fractured ambitions. Each general, once bound by camaraderie, became a rival or potential enemy. Trust was a thing of the past, replaced by calculated alliances and betrayals. The killing of Perdiccas marked the beginning of a ruthless era where each successor sought to take as much as he could, leading to a chain of wars that would pit former allies against each other in a brutal scramble for supremacy. The death of Perdiccas not only marked the end of a powerful leader, but showed that the Diadochi would stop at nothing to secure their own interests, even if it meant turning on their own comrades. This event fundamentally altered the nature of the conflicts to come. What began as a clash between loyalties had become a ruthless competition for control, wealth, and territory. The legacy of Alexander, which had once united them under a shared cause, was now little more than a fading memory, as each Diadochi turned his ambitions toward establishing an independent kingdom. The ideals of unity and shared glory had been sacrificed on the altar of power, leaving behind a world where betrayal, ambition, and bloodshed would rule. With Perdiccas gone, a new wave of ambition surged among the remaining Diadochi, each driven to seize a piece of Alexander's empire. Standing out among them was Antigonus, known as the One-Eyed, due to his signature missing eye from an old battlefield injury. Antigonus was not merely a soldier but a brilliant strategist and an ambitious leader who dreamed of reuniting Alexander's empire under his rule. His ambitions went far beyond simply controlling his own territories. He sought to restore the empire to its former glory with himself at the center. In Asia Minor, Antigonus gathered a formidable army and began expanding his influence, using force and diplomacy to bring neighboring territories under his sway. This rising power attracted both fear and admiration, making him a critical player and a threat to the other Diadochi. Meanwhile, Seleucus was building his own stronghold in Babylon, establishing himself as a ruler with deep roots in the east. His hold over Babylon was strategic, as it controlled access to the wealth of the eastern provinces, which gave Seleucus the resources to support a powerful army. Seleucus proved to be a master at securing loyalty and building alliances, which allowed him to expand his influence beyond Babylon and into surrounding territories. Farther west, Ptolemy fortified his grip on Egypt, transforming it into a nearly impenetrable bastion. While other territories were destabilized by conflict, Egypt under Ptolemy's rule became a safe haven, well-organized and protected, positioning him as a king in his own right. His calculated and defensive approach stood in contrast to the aggressive expansionism of Antigonus, but it allowed him to consolidate his power without overextending his forces. As each of these leaders solidified their positions, the political landscape of the former empire became a complex web of alliances, betrayals, and shifting loyalties. Antigonus's growing ambition alarmed the other Diadochi, who feared that his vision of a reunited empire would come at their expense. In response, they formed a coalition to stop him, recognizing that they would have to set aside their own rivalries, at least temporarily, to prevent Antigonus from gaining complete dominance. The alliance included Seleucus, Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Cassander, each with their own motives but united by the shared threat of Antigonus's power. Tensions boiled over, and this fragile coalition led to the decisive clash at the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BCE, a conflict that would determine the fate of the empire once and for all. The Battle of Ipsus was one of the largest and bloodiest battles of the Diadochi Wars, a monumental clash where war elephants, cavalry, and infantry collided in a struggle that symbolized the final death throes of Alexander's united empire. Antigonus fought valiantly, displaying the cunning and bravery that had made him a legend, but ultimately, the combined forces of his enemies were too much to overcome. His once unbreakable army began to falter under the relentless pressure of the coalition forces, and at a critical moment, Antigonus himself was struck down, ending his dream of reuniting the empire. The battlefield was strewn with the remnants of his ambitions, and the Diadochi coalition emerged victorious, effectively cementing the permanent division of the empire. The fall of Antigonus marked a turning point in the wars of the Diadochi, signaling the end of any realistic hope for a unified empire. Alexander's realm was now irrevocably fractured, with each Diadochi claiming independent kingdoms. Seleucus took control of much of the eastern territories, while Ptolemy retained Egypt, and Lysimachus expanded into Asia Minor. The Battle of Ipsus thus shaped the final map of the Hellenistic kingdoms, carving Alexander's once great empire into rival states. In their victory, the Diadochi had ensured that Alexander's legacy would live on, not as a single united empire, but as a collection of fiercely independent kingdoms, each ruled by one of his former companions, now forever locked in rivalry and remembrance of the empire that once was. The climactic Battle of Ipsus marked the final chapter in the struggle for Alexander's empire, a brutal confrontation that would ultimately determine its fate. Tensions had reached a breaking point as Antigonus the One-Eyed, by now an aging but still fiercely ambitious leader, prepared to face the combined might of Seleucus and Lysimachus. Antigonus, despite his advancing years, had become a towering force, known for his cunning strategies and relentless drive to reunite Alexander's empire under his rule. But as his power grew, so did the threat he posed to his former allies. Seleucus and Lysimachus, understanding that only a united front could counter the unstoppable force of Antigonus's army, joined forces to challenge him. Their alliance was one of necessity rather than trust, a temporary truce forged with the singular goal of halting Antigonus's campaign for supremacy. In the months leading up to Ipsus, both sides meticulously prepared, gathering their forces and honing strategies that would take advantage of each commander's unique strengths. Antigonus's army was formidable, boasting not only well-trained infantry and cavalry but also a large number of war elephants, a prized advantage on the ancient battlefield. These elephants, obtained through alliances in India, were a symbol of his influence and power, and Antigonus believed they would give him the upper hand against any opponent. Seleucus, however, was no stranger to these colossal beasts. He too had acquired elephants from his campaigns in the east, creating an unprecedented spectacle as both sides prepared to unleash these powerful creatures in battle. The stage was set for one of the most epic confrontations in Hellenistic history, with each side determined to claim victory and reshape the remnants of Alexander's empire. The battle itself unfolded as a chess game of tactical maneuvers, where every decision carried the weight of an empire's future. Antigonus and his son, Demetrius, commanded their forces with a masterful blend of offensive and defensive tactics, aiming to break the coalition's lines and shatter their morale. But Seleucus and Lysimachus anticipated this aggression and prepared for the onslaught, using disciplined formations to absorb and counter Antigonus's attacks. The war elephants, towering above the soldiers, played a pivotal role in the opening stages of the battle, charging with a thunderous momentum that shook the earth and scattered troops. Antigonus relied on these giants to intimidate his enemies and create a breach in the coalition's ranks. However, Seleucus had counter-strategies in place, employing skilled archers and javelin throwers to neutralize the elephants and disorient them, turning Antigonus's greatest asset into a liability. As the battle raged on, Demetrius led a daring cavalry assault, seeking to flank the coalition's forces and break through to the enemy command. For a moment, it seemed as though Antigonus's forces might gain the upper hand, as Demetrius's cavalry struck with speed and precision, forcing Seleucus's men to regroup and adjust. But in the chaos of battle, communication between Antigonus and Demetrius faltered, and the split-second decisions that had once made them formidable began to unravel under the relentless assault of their enemies. Seleucus and Lysimachus seized this opportunity, pressing their advantage and surrounding Antigonus's main forces. They drove a wedge between father and son, isolating Antigonus in the center of the battlefield. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the blood-soaked earth, the battle reached its tragic climax. Antigonus, refusing to surrender, fought bravely until the end, rallying his troops with a fierce resolve that had made him a legendary figure. But at 80 years old, he was physically outmatched, and his once mighty army was now overwhelmed. In a final, desperate stand, Antigonus was struck down by a spear, his lifeless body collapsing amidst the chaos. His death sent a shockwave through the battlefield, demoralizing his remaining forces and sealing the coalition's victory. The death of Antigonus signified more than the fall of a single leader. It marked the end of any remaining dream of reuniting Alexander's empire. With Antigonus defeated, the empire's final fragmentation was inevitable. In the aftermath of Ipsus, the coalition divided the territories among themselves, solidifying their control and ensuring that no single ruler could dominate. Seleucus took control of much of Asia, establishing what would become the Seleucid Empire, while Lysimachus gained authority over Asia Minor. Ptolemy, though absent from the battle, retained his stronghold in Egypt, now further secured by Antigonus's defeat. Each of these leaders now ruled as kings in their own right, not as loyal successors to Alexander's vision but as independent rulers with their own ambitions and agendas. The empire, once united under a single ruler, was now splintered into multiple kingdoms, each governed by one of Alexander's former companions or their descendants. The Battle of Ipsus had not only decided the fate of Antigonus but had irrevocably changed the course of history. Alexander's empire, once a symbol of unbridled ambition and cultural fusion, was now broken, its vast expanse divided into rival kingdoms. The unity that had once inspired dreams of a shared Greek and Eastern world was gone, replaced by a fractured landscape of competing dynasties. The Diadochi, once bound by loyalty to Alexander, had become his empire's executioners, ensuring that it would live on only in the stories of a golden age long past. The fragmentation of Alexander's empire laid the groundwork for the Hellenistic kingdoms, where Greek culture would blend with Eastern influences, shaping civilizations for centuries but forever under separate banners. The legacy of Ipsus was a reminder of the brutal cost of ambition and the fragility of empire, a testament to how even the most powerful dreams can crumble under the weight of human desire. As the years rolled on following the decisive Battle of Ipsus, the once united empire of Alexander the Great slowly crumbled, its fragments scattered under the rule of his former generals, the Diadochi. Seleucus, a key figure in the post-Alexander power struggle, emerged as the greatest victor of all. With his consolidation of power over the vast territories of Babylon, Persia, and the eastern satrapies, Seleucus went on to found the Seleucid Empire, one of the most influential Hellenistic kingdoms. His reign brought stability to the east, preserving Alexander's legacy in the region, yet it was also marked by ongoing conflict, as Seleucus faced continuous threats from rival factions and internal unrest. By the time of his death in 281 BCE, Seleucus had secured his place as one of the most formidable Hellenistic rulers, but his empire, while powerful, remained a fragmented echo of Alexander's original dream. Meanwhile, Ptolemy, having successfully established his rule in Egypt, fortified his kingdom against external threats, turning the Nile into a stable and prosperous realm. His dynasty, the Ptolemies, would endure for nearly 3 centuries, overseeing an Egypt that remained a cultural and intellectual hub of the ancient world. Ptolemy's success was built on a careful mix of diplomacy, military prowess, and the strategic management of Egypt's wealth and resources. Egypt under the Ptolemies became a lasting symbol of Hellenistic power, although, like Seleucus, Ptolemy's kingdom was constantly marked by dynastic struggles and succession issues that would ultimately result in internal conflict and decline. Despite these challenges, the Ptolemaic dynasty remained a formidable player in the Mediterranean world until the death of Cleopatra and the Roman conquest in 30 BCE. Meanwhile, the reigns of Lysimachus and Cassander began to unravel. Lysimachus, who had gained control over much of Thrace and Asia Minor, found his empire beset by constant rebellions and military defeats. His rule, which started with promise, gradually succumbed to internal strife and the external pressure of other Hellenistic powers. In 281 BCE, Lysimachus was killed in battle, marking the end of his brief reign. His death, along with the fragmentation of his territories, left the region in a state of political instability. Similarly, Cassander, who had seized control over Macedon and parts of Greece, struggled to hold onto his fragile kingdom. His reign was marred by the constant threat of insurrection and the emergence of new challengers for his throne. By the time of his death in 297 BCE, Macedon was in disarray, unable to maintain the dominance that it had once held under Alexander. As these new kingdoms, the Seleucid Empire, Ptolemaic Egypt, and the fracturing remnants of Lysimachus and Cassander's territories, took shape, the ancient world entered a new phase, the Hellenistic period. The era that Alexander had hoped to unify under one crown instead became a patchwork of rival states, each with its own ambitions and internal divisions. The Hellenistic world saw the spread of Greek culture and ideas across a vast expanse, from Egypt to India, but it also became a battleground for competing dynasties, where the legacy of Alexander was both celebrated and contorted by those who claimed to be his heirs. Cities like Alexandria, Antioch, and Seleucia thrived as centers of learning and cultural exchange, but the constant warfare between the Diadochi also led to the decline of many once powerful states. And then there's the tragic irony. Alexander's dream of a united world, a global empire that blended East and West, was never realized. Instead, his successors, driven by ambition and personal power, divided the empire into pieces, each ruler seeking to carve out their own legacy from the ashes of his conquest. The very thing that had made Alexander so extraordinary, the unification of such diverse peoples under one rule, was destroyed by the very men who had sworn loyalty to him. They had witnessed firsthand the power of a single ruler commanding vast lands, yet they were unable to put aside their own ambitions to preserve that unity. Instead of a world united by Greek ideals and a shared vision, they left behind a world fractured by war, intrigue, and division. In the end, Alexander's empire was not a dream of permanent unity, but a fleeting moment in history. The men who followed him, the Diadochi, shaped the ancient world in ways that were profound, but they also ensured that the hope of a unified empire would remain just that, a hope never to be realized. The rise and fall of these Hellenistic kingdoms stand as a testament to the ambitions of men who sought to rule in the shadow of a legend, only to find that power, once seized, is often fleeting. The legacy of Alexander's empire lives on in the cultural and intellectual contributions of the Hellenistic period, but the fractured world he left behind is a poignant reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the price of empire. The Diadochi Wars, the brutal and relentless struggle for dominance among Alexander the Great's generals, marked the tragic end of one of the most remarkable empires in history. What had once been a unified force, stretching from Greece to India, soon fragmented into a chaotic battleground as each of Alexander's trusted commanders vied for control. The consequences of these wars were far-reaching, not only in the physical division of Alexander's empire but also in the ideological shifts that followed. The unity that Alexander had forged through unparalleled military campaigns was destroyed, and the dream of a single, united empire was shattered. The resulting kingdoms, the Seleucid Empire, Ptolemaic Egypt, and the remnants of Macedon, each grew powerful in their own right, but never achieved the cohesion and stability that Alexander had envisioned. Instead, they became a reminder of the fleeting nature of power and the dangers of ambition without foresight. As we reflect on the legacy of Alexander and his generals, a central question arises. Could the empire have survived had Alexander left behind a clearer succession plan? The answer, though speculative, seems clear: perhaps not. Alexander's brilliance on the battlefield was matched only by his ability to unite diverse cultures under a single banner, but the absence of a solid succession plan left a vacuum of power that no one could fill. His untimely death at the age of 32 left his empire in the hands of men who were not prepared to honor his vision of unity. Instead, they allowed their personal ambitions to tear apart the empire piece by piece. Had Alexander established a more structured succession, perhaps his empire could have endured for generations. But history teaches us that such questions of what if are often futile, and the course of events was set by human nature, ambition, betrayal, and the thirst for power that defines all empires. Ultimately, the Diadochi's endless fighting and greed led to the ruin of Alexander's empire, leaving behind a fractured world that, while influenced by Hellenistic culture, was forever divided. The kingdoms that rose from the ashes of Alexander's conquests became arenas for continuous warfare, each general now more focused on their own power than on the collective dream of a united world. In this, we see the bittersweet truth. Alexander's ambition to create a lasting empire, a legacy of unity and cultural exchange, was undone by the very men who had helped him achieve it. They took the dream of a unified world and turned it into a fractured reality, where personal glory overshadowed the collective good. The Diadochi Wars serve as a powerful reminder of the fleeting nature of glory and ambition. Alexander's rise was meteoric, but his empire, much like the legend of his life, was ephemeral. The generals who inherited his empire chased power with such fervor that they lost sight of the unity and vision that had made Alexander great in the first place. The world he left behind, shaped by his extraordinary conquests, was torn apart not by external threats, but by internal betrayal and infighting. The Diadochi's relentless quest for dominance destroyed the very thing they had all fought for, the greatness of Alexander's vision. And so, the tragic story of the Diadochi serves as a poignant reminder. Empires may rise swiftly, but they often fall just as fast, swept away by the winds of ambition and the fragility of human nature. The lost empire of Alexander, with its grand dreams and glorious potential, is a reminder of how quickly the fleeting nature of power can lead to the collapse of what once seemed invincible. If you found the rise and fall of Alexander's empire as fascinating as we did, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think could have saved Alexander's empire? Was a unified world ever possible? Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on more historical deep dives and incredible stories from the past. And, if you want to see more content like this, turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one, where we uncover more of history's greatest triumphs and tragic downfalls.